Hello, and welcome to Science with Stina on this lovely Monday. Thank you all for tuning in for today's live online learning experience. We will be doing an experiment focused on watersheds. So as always, this is our fun new way to replace our in-school workshops. So if you could tune in and in the comments let us know where you're watching from and what students are with you, whether you're watching live or this video later. We'd like to know that for our grant reporting purposes. So if you could do that, let us know. We're so excited to have you. So today we're going to be learning about watersheds. And if you didn't know it, everybody lives on a watershed. Now you might be thinking, okay, cool, but what is a watershed? And it's a lot about like what it sounds like. So if I think of the word watershed, it's kind of like where the water is stored. So it's an area of land, and all the water that falls on that land collects to one body of water. So for where we're at, here at Harbor WildWatch, we're in Gig Harbor, and we are part of the Key Peninsula Gig Harbor Islands watershed. So if I look at this map, we're about right in here, and all the water that falls in Gig Harbor is going to end up in this part of the Puget Sound. We could zoom out and look even further, and we'd be part of the Puget Sound watershed. In our event, we added a link to the USGS website, and you can actually find your very own watershed address and check out what watershed you're part of, which is kind of a cool thing to know because it's surprisingly important to have an idea about where the water goes. And we will be investigating that further as we do our experiment today. So for your experiment, we suggest that you have a blank piece of paper, some permanent markers, some washable markers. For permanent markers, it also works if you're worried about maybe bleeding through onto your table. Colored pencils also work well as crayons, or as my coworkers would say, crayons. This is a lovely time to have a discussion about how you pronounce that word, because my lovely friends may be very self-conscious of how to say that. So anyways, however you say crayons, rock and roll. So what we're gonna do is take this piece of paper. Other things you need. I like a spray bottle. It also just works if you're close to the sink. But because I'm using a spray bottle, I also have a nice tub on hand. If you have a plate or a pie pan, like a cookie tray, those will work as well. So with those supplies ready to go, we can hop into our experiment today. So this experiment takes a little bit of prep. So with your blank piece of paper, this is the fun part, crumple it. Wad it up, not too tight necessarily, but get it nice and bent. Pop this so we're not sliding around too much. And then on this piece of paper, we're gonna draw our very own neighborhood. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, because what we're doing is we are making a model. And scientists, they use models all the time to represent reality. It's a pretty handy thing for us to do, because it's hard for me to maybe do a real life experiment, especially since I'm going to be looking at pollution. I would hate to experiment in a natural place, add pollution to it, and potentially cause some negative impacts. So by using a model, we can kind of do whatever we want, test all sorts of different things, and without harming the real world, see what happens, and then hopefully come up with some good ideas about how to fix that. So with your nice crumpled piece of paper, I'm going to shift gears a little bit so that you can see what I'm going to draw. You're going to start with your permanent markers. So let me pop over here. All right. So on your watershed, you're going to imagine your nice big body of water. For our intents and purposes, I'm going to use the Puget Sound, and I'm just going to kind of pick this nice little curve in my line. You could do some labeling. That's usually a good thing to do when you're making scientific drawings. This, of course, is a representation of probably somewhere on our Key Peninsula watershed. So we have the Puget Sound here. Here's some nice little waves. You can draw on your favorite beach. I'm gonna, since I live in Tacoma, I live kind of on top of the hill, I'm gonna put my house over here. Nice little chimney, staying warm, little door, window, excellent. You might think, what other things do I have in my neighborhood? I have the grocery store, saying welcome, buy groceries, nice big doors. I might also put in, ooh, we're gonna need a candy store, right? Put a candy cane in there, your lollipop, I don't know. If that's important. Maybe a community center, perhaps a music hall, I don't know. You can draw, woo! A music symbol. Really, whatever you want to do, adding to your neighborhood, maybe you can have the factory off in the distance, making supplies, some more houses. You can draw your friend's house if you want. Really, you can spend a lot of time making your lovely, nice neighborhood. I'm also going to add, I kind of live close to Puget Park, so I'm going to add a nice river.
But can you write any of these backwards? Howard says Stina needs to write backwards.
Uh-oh, is it doing
It's all vice versa.
Here, let me do a quick fix. Do-do-do-do. Yeah, that's awkward. Flip that. How about that?
There you go, Howard.
You can add some little river squiggles for bacon. No, it's not actually bacon. Put that across. Oh, I wish I lived this close to the creek or river. That'd be awesome. Now, once you have your neighborhood all set, the next thing you're going to do is we're going to think about some of the everyday pollution that occurs in our watershed. So we might have, let's see, actually I want to draw a couple more things. I have my car. It's a nice looking car. Okay. So some everyday pollution, since I drive my car a lot, hopefully I have it nice and maintained. This is where we're going to switch over to our washable markers. So you can set all your permanent markers aside. And I'm going to draw maybe some leaky oil. I could also be in the parking lot of our grocery store, maybe outside of the factory, maybe you're leaking oil too. We also might have, if anybody, I know my neighbors, they have the best dog. His name is Charlie, but man, Charlie's a big dog. Might have some big Charlie poops. This is the farm over here. We might have some cow poops. You know, people might take their dog on a walk. More little, oh man, that's everywhere. I know it's also very common to use chemical fertilizers in our yards, so we might add some of that fertilizer to our yards. We might also have some chemicals from our factory. Hopefully they're not leaking out, but in case they are. Uh-oh, somebody left a wrapper at the grocery store and just people leaving trash. Litter all over. That's too bad. We might also have some, like, we might use some chemicals to, like, take care of a wasp problem and spray that, or put some poison out for some rats. We're just kind of, I don't know, there's some candy wrappers from our candy store. It looks like we have a lot of pollution. Now, normally looking out on our lovely watershed, you're not going to see all of this pollution necessarily. It can be kind of invisible. But we're going to make some predictions about what happens to these different chemicals when it rains. Because we live in the Puget Sound, that's a pretty common occurrence. And so this spray bottle that we prepared is going to be handy in making it rain. Now, as a good scientist, I want you all to make a prediction about where these chemicals are going to end up. Are they going to stay in place? Are they going to seep into the ground? Now, this is obviously a good time to talk about the limitations of our model. Clearly, this piece of paper is not a real-life watershed, but it kind of does a good job of giving us that area of land where all the water that falls on it will end up in kind of the lower downstream place, and that, for us, might be the Puget Sound. So, to put those predictions you have to the test, that's where we're gonna get our tray out, contain mess, and we're gonna make it rain. Now, usually I have a couple rules. If you're doing this experiment with your siblings or your parents, rule number 1 is don't spray each other, and rule number 2 is probably don't spray your pets. They would not be happy about that. So, with that, we're gonna bring on the rainstorm, keeping our prediction in mind, being sure to make observations about where we notice this pollution going. Are you ready? I am. Start with some sprays. Ooh. Okay, let's get a big storm. Uh-oh, that pollution is moving and grooving. We have some problems here. More rain. More showers. You can do this as long as you'd like, but I think we're getting the idea that this pollution is getting picked up by the water and it's traveling downstream. This is of course quite unfortunate for the health and the water quality in our rivers as well as the Puget Sound. And so I could leave this experiment here and say, okay, we spend time doing, all of this everyday pollution. We're not picking up our dog poop, we're leaving trash on the ground, we're fertilizing our lawns, we're driving our cars with leaky oil, even just the exhaust from our cars and brake dust. This is all causing potential problems in our environment. What can we do about it? And that's the important question, because if I just left it at we do a lot of polluting, that's a pretty depressing experiment and doesn't say good things about the health of our lovely Puget Sound or really whatever water body your personal watershed leads to. And from the Puget Sound, it of course all connects to the ocean, so even for my lovely family living in Montana, it's important for them to think about how the Montana rivers connect and move out to bigger bodies of water. We really all have an impact. These oceans are like all collectively ours, and we have a responsibility to take action to protect these places that we live. And so in the comments, I think this is a great opportunity for you to share a solution you might have. I know if I'm thinking about my car, which I use to drive to work, I'm gonna regularly maintain and make sure that I'm not leaking oil. Now is a great time because I'm driving much less than normal, so just finding alternative modes of transportation, whether it's scooting around on my longboard, riding my bike. Of course, whenever I'm doing that, it's always important to wear a helmet because you only get one brain. So doing that safely, but causing less emissions so that we're not contributing to the greenhouse gas effect, which then ultimately causes climate change, which we know is not a good deal for our environment. So less driving is always good. I think I someday hope to be a dog owner. For all of you out there who are the pooper scoopers in your family, you can give yourself a pat on the back because you're already a Puget Sound protector by keeping the harmful bacteria that's found in pet waste out of our environment. That's a huge help to the Puget Sound. I was reading an article about how Seattle has more pets than children, and thinking about all the dog poop that would accumulate. So scooping the poop is definitely an important thing that you can do. Let's see, other things, obviously picking up your litter. Don't be a litter bug out there. Doing beach cleanups with different organizations. We like to partner with the South Sound Surfrider Foundation. Of course, those beach cleanups are on pause for the time being, but once our stay-at-home orders are lifted, we'll be excited to join them out on the beach. Howard's out there asking about washing our cars, a very important thing to have a nice clean ride. But if I were to just wash my car out on the street, all of the dirt and grime and soap is just gonna come right off and go into things called storm drains. Those unfortunately don't have filters that clean out that dirty water. And so instead of washing my car on the street, I would, if I want to wash it personally, move it into the grass or gravel where there's a permeable surface where that water can flow into the ground and get filtered out. But better yet, take it to your local car wash and get it cleaned there. At car washes, they have a water filtration system. All that dirty water gets filtered and cleaned before it doesn't just go straight into the sound, I guess. So that is an excellent mention there, Howard. Thanks for tuning in. Let's see, so other things we can do, you can use more natural ways to fertilize your lovely lawns. Composting is totally in, and we highly recommend that rather than using the chemical fertilizers. That kind of more natural substance can still result in nice green lawns if that's what you're going for. You can also just say buy lawns altogether and plant yourself an ocean-friendly garden with lots of water-tolerant or drought-tolerant plants, more native species here that are used to drying out in the summertime but stay beautiful, as well as filter all sorts of pollution that can move throughout your watershed. And then kind of, I'll just end with thinking about ways we can reduce some of that trash. I have with me today my coffee in a nice reusable container. I think that's a really fun way to conclude this lesson, is to think about all the different things that you can do to eliminate some of that single-use plastic in your life. Plastic, of course, is important for some things when it comes to medical supplies, as well as that helmet I mentioned if you're riding your bike instead of driving your car. But there's a lot of things we use plastic for that might be a little overkill. So all those plastic water bottles, I can drink water straight from the tap, especially if, based on our last lesson, if you took some time to figure out where your water comes from, you'll be surprised that that tap water is pretty perfectly clean and easy to drink. So just use that instead of buying plastic. Plastic, of course, comes from oil, which is a non-renewable resource. You can't get more of it, and we should save that for things that are important rather than things that we use once and throw away. So with that, I'd love to see more ideas you have about keeping your watershed nice and healthy. Maybe any observations. Were you surprised how much the pollution moved? Were you surprised if it kind of stayed? Are there ways we could improve this model? Could we make it better by doing something else? You're the scientist out there. You can try some different things, change your variables, add more pollution, add less pollution, and see what happens. So with that, thank you so much for joining today's Harbor WildWatch online lesson. Some science with Stina. We enjoy having you, and as always, while you're not required, if you feel inspired, we accept gladly any donations you can make through our Harbor WildWatch website. If you can't do that, at least like us on Facebook and other social media platforms. Share our stuff with people you think might be interested, and keep learning and having fun. Thanks so much, and see you next Monday.